What we're going to talk about tonight is something I've been playing around with as I've been working on the Diagnosing Doubt book, and as we've been going through a couple other things that I am seeing this everywhere. I don't know who all knows, I'm working on a book on doubt called Diagnosing Doubt. And one of the things that I've been really mulling over is things that happen that will make someone either more predisposed to doubt or predisposed to faith. And one of the things that we can do, and this is actually, it brought up it's a philosophical term, which I'm not going to use in the way that any of the philosophy people use it. And it's this term called seeming, and the idea of something seeming true. The seeming true, it's something that philosophers, if you're a philosophy person, they use it in a completely different way with people who are uber hyper skeptical. So I'm going to just pretend like they haven't used it and use it in the way that I want to use it, which is this idea of when things just kind of intuitively sound true. But the reason why things sometimes intuitively sound true is because there's a psychological principle that I learned about in this book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And it says that the brain has a difficult time discerning the difference between what is familiar and that which is true. So this concept of that which is familiar and that which is true, for some reason, our brain lumps those together. And so the more we've heard something, the more plausible it sounds later. So that's where this idea of seeming is kind of coming along. The idea of plausibility, the word seeming could be replaced with the word plausibility. And if you look at the way, especially that fairy tales were structured back in the, within the first couple hundred years of the United States, it had a very, very Judeo-Christian worldview, in the sense that, number one, there were things like absolute truth. There was things like absolute evil. There was things like good. There was the battle between good and evil. There was the concept that evil will ultimately win and good will ultimately win and evil will be ultimately vanquished. This right there, as my professor Clay Jones used to say, that someone's, when you describe the salvation story, and you look at that in comparison to a lot of the fairy tales. Some people say, don't fairy tales, doesn't salvation just sound like a fairy tale? And he says, no, it's the opposite. Fairy tales sound like the salvation story. And I think one of the things that we have within this Judeo-Christian worldview is we're giving people a story that becomes familiar. So when they start picking up on themes of this story within scripture, they have what is that seeming principle, this plausibility. This sounds like it can be true because I've been exposed to this over and over and over again. And so this is the concept also of when I'm playing around with the phrase, the worldview waters in which you swim. So this was the chapter I was working on today. And the idea of swimming in worldview waters, it's like if a fish were to ask me, what is it like to live in air? I would be like, I don't, I could kind of describe it, but you know what? I could describe it because I know what it's like to be dry and I know what it's like to be wet. If I were to ask a fish, what's it like to be in water? It would not know what to say because a fish doesn't even know what it's like to be dry. So when we have worldview waters, we have a way that it's like this is how all the stories that are around us are portraying what is true, what is real, and what is good. And we absorb these concepts of what is true, what is real, and what is good. So like another thing that I like to compare it to is back in the day when you were in science class, maybe back in third, fourth, fifth grade, where they would do their, teaching about osmosis and how dyes work. It's like you would get the white carnation or the white rose, and you would put it in water that had been dyed with food coloring. And so you could actually take this white rose and you could turn it pink, or you could turn it blue, or you could turn it green, or basically whatever color you wanted to turn it, because all you had to do is put that food dye into the water, and that flower would take up the water with the food dye, and it actually started coloring its petals. This is kind of what we're doing with concepts of truth in our culture. That it's not something that we can just change on a dime. It's not something where we can just decide something's going to be different. That would be almost like, if you remember from the movie Alice in Wonderland, where you have the Queen of Hearts that keeps painting the roses red. We're painting the roses red, and it's like she's trying to paint the roses red, but that's not actually making red roses. Similarly, if we have been immersed in a certain worldview, we have taken up that worldview with that media. So think about every piece of worldview waters that we're swimming in. We're talking culture, we're talking movies, we're talking music, we're talking art, we're talking just the stories that are all around us. And these have all these tiny little pieces of truth that, just like the flower, when it takes it up, it incorporates it into 1,000 different cells that it can't just suddenly turn a switch off. And so what we're doing with our kids is we are priming them for the big stories. Now, like I said, in the past, the big stories had all been centered around the idea that there's good and that there's evil, that there's a battle, that good will ultimately win out and evil will ultimately be vanquished. But I would say that not only have we started turning that on its head, but we've actually gone step by step wise to get to the point where we have the exact opposite of that story. I haven't worked out in my head exactly where all those steps are, but let's say that one of the steps that we have is what we're seeing with critical theory that is going on in our culture. The concept of critical theory is really turning on its head who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed. Because when we change who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed, the other thing that we change is who is the hero and who is the villain. When we start changing who is the hero and who is the villain, we start changing the concept what is good and what is evil. And to the point that we have now, where we're not only just saying it's murky or there's nuance or there's a side to both stories, we're actually saying the good guy is actually the evil guy and the evil guy is actually the good guy. Now, the reason why I'm wanting to bring this up specifically is that this actually follows a very specific type of theology that is starting to make the rounds. And as we talked about at the beginning of this concept of seeming, if something seems true, the plausibility of something starts to go up higher and higher the more times you hear this story repeated. And so the theology that I'm going to talk about is Luciferian theology. So I'm sure everybody, when I say the name Lucifer, everybody here knows what I'm talking about. Luciferian theology really is the idea that God is actually the bad guy and Satan is actually the good guy. In fact, I encountered this for the first time several years, maybe like a decade or more ago. I can't remember who it was with. But it was this girl who was saying she really, really struggled with doubt. And we were kind of discussing why do you struggle with doubt? And she said, Satan knew face to face. He knew God. He saw God. He heard God. He talked to God. What did he know that we don't? Why did he rebel? He had to have known something. And of course, I'm like moving around trying to get out of the way of whatever lightning bolt's going to come down and smite us both at that point. But she brought up a very good point. This idea that, number one, this is like absolutely a demonic attack to say, hey, maybe Lucifer knew something that everybody else didn't know. So this was the first time I was exposed to this kind of theology where I didn't even realize that this is something that people actively teach. But now what we're saying, if you had said that to a kid back in the 1950s, back when we had just finished with the Nazis, back when they had just watched Sleeping Beauty, where you have the name Maleficent, which literally means like the evil one. We have 101 Dalmatians with Cruella de Vil, whose name literally means the cruel devil. You have all these very, very obviously evil characters. I mean, you just listen to hold on, I should pull up the Cruella de Vil. Hey, Emily, will you pull up the song Cruella de Vil? And I'm going to have you read those lyrics in a little bit. And also bring up the song from The Grinch that talks about the Grinch. So I'm going to have Emily bring those up. If you had talked to a kid back then, they had no category for the idea of the bad guy actually being good because they had never seen the bad guy being good. And so if someone had tried to come in back in the 50s with this Luciferian theology and said, "Hey, have you ever thought that maybe Satan was the good guy?" They would have looked at you and said, "That sounds dumb. He's so clearly evil. It's so common sense that he's the bad guy and he is not the one that can be trusted." That sense of common sense is basically them saying the worldview waters in which I've been in, the thing that I've imbibed in or imbibed over the years has been that absolute truth exists, evil exists, good exists. There's a battle, evil's going to lose and good is going to win. But we are not having that anymore. So, Emily, do you have the lyrics for Cruella de Vil? I want Emily to read these out to y'all real quick.
Whole lyric. Oh,
Enough for us to get the idea.
all right, you just interrupt me when you want me to stop.
Okay.
Cruella de Vil. If she doesn't scare you, no evil thing will. To see her is to take a sudden chill. Cruella de Vil, the curl of her lips, the ice of her stare. All innocent children had better beware. She's like a spider waiting for the kill. Look out for Cruella de Vil.
Ooh, I can barely hear you. You're starting to go down a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Just talk a little louder.
Okay. Cruella, at first you think Cruella is the devil, but after time has worn away the shock, you come to realize you've seen her kind of eyes watching you from underneath a rock. This vampire bat, this inhuman beast, she ought to be locked up and never released. The world was such a wholesome place until Cruella de Vil.
I'd say that's a good enough. This was the worldview that we were giving kids. Evil was clearly evil. Now, so I spent today watching, I tried to find the new movie Cruella, which is, I can't remember the name it stars this one actress that I love. She was in Oh, she was in Easy A. She was in a bunch of things. She's funny. I like her. But I wanted to see that because I know that they've kind of flipped it on its head that, she has some big trauma that happens. So the thing that I was watching today was Maleficent. It was a movie that John got me a long time ago, and I had never watched it until I started thinking about all these themes about how they switched. So what they did with Maleficent is it is literally that Luciferian theology where she starts out almost this kind of demonic looking character with like the wings and everything. And what happens is when man comes, he breaks his promise to her and cuts off her wings. And so then she is so angry. It's like, but it's like this justifiable anger. It's like Hollywood is obsessed with the concept of the backstory for the villain. Now, I want to say that usually when it comes to the real world, we don't have such clear-cut categories as the absolute evil or the absolute good because we are all humans. And so it is good to have some kind of nuance in that sense. But when we're dealing with these folklore and fairy tales, we are supposed to still deal in a little bit of absolutes of that there is good and there's evil, but they're not even trying to muddy the water. They're trying to actually replace it. So like the kings and the princes that were all the good ones, the ones that you wanted to save you, they are the ones who actually have harmed the evil character to the point to where you are sympathetic to this evil character and you say, you know what, they had a really good point. They are justified in the evil that they perpetrate. And so that is the story that kids are starting to get because kids a lot of times aren't going to be comparing the original Sleeping, yes, Has Been Hotel. That's where it is very specifically. Sorry, I'll go into that in a second. Mary just put that in the chat. A lot of kids aren't going to be comparing the Sleeping Beauty from the 40s to Maleficent from now. Or if they do, that's some pretty good parenting right there to show them, hey, let's look at the differences between these two. Kids usually just have whatever movies are coming out when they're young. And those are the ones that are teaching them this worldview. So we as adults can look at this and we can say, oh, that's an interesting spin on an old tale because we've learned the old tale. We are familiar with the old worldview. But when we have kids who are not familiar with this old worldview, what we are doing is we are creating a category. We are creating a plausibility structure. We are creating the emotion of this seems true because this theme the bad guy is really the good guy and the good guy is really the bad guy has become so familiar that now that's what seems true because again the brain has a difficult time distinguishing between that which is familiar and that which is true. Mary brought up a really good point. So this actually is in, and I wish I'd thought of to get this in advance. It's such a crude show. Like I watched a couple episodes really just to take one for the team. I think Amy and I might have done that. Amy and I are pretty good when there's something out there that nobody should watch, and we're like, we're gonna do it. So we do it just so that we can speak on it usually, and it is bad. It's very much an adult cartoon, but it is based on the premise that basically Adam and Eve were in the garden. And oh golly, I'm trying to remember. Mary, do you remember the story behind that? It's like I remember the way that they say it. Basically, it is where Satan was the good guy and God is the evil one. And throughout this entire cartoon, it portrays all the angels as just these jerks. I mean, absolute jerks. And it portrays all the demons not necessarily as if they're just like these beautiful, sweet things. They still show all the depravity, all the sexuality, all the nonsense, all the everything, but they are the sympathetic characters. Which again brings us back to when we look at the mama bear roar technique, one of the things we ask for when you're trying to decide what worldview is coming through in this movie, we say, who is the hero and who is the villain? Who are you supposed to root for? And who are you supposed to root against? So anyway, that is kind of the concept. So I want to open this up a little bit to discussion to see, has anyone else seen this coming through in movies and had any of your kids maybe make comments about this?
I was thinking about Wicked, both the Wicked ones, which is interesting because um, they're old, right? Like the story is old. I didn't see the original though, so I don't know if it was the same or if it was
I
different.
think the original
But
Wicked is just as bad. I think it's like the
okay.
original is supposed to be Wizard of Oz, but from what I've heard, the book Wicked is
Hmm.
even worse than the movies. They've got like
Really?
I think they have like from what I've heard from someone, they've got like bestiality in there and stuff. So it's like
Yikes!
really not appropriate. But
That would kind of make sense. But I'm glad they didn't do that in the new movie.
yes, I thought that was sweet, wasn't it? Mm.
That was sweet. Well, so my husband was like really disturbed by it, and he was like, they're turning it on their head." That's what he kept saying. Like, it used to be you knew who was good and who was evil, and now we're always making the bad guy like the backstory and like sympathetic, and then you're like, "Oh, I'm on the bad guy's side now." And I was like, "Well, I mean, on the one hand, we know that no one's perfect. Like, I don't know. Sometimes the start good versus evil is hard for me because, humans are not perfect. And
Yeah.
people do have backstories. And so I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, but I'd love your thoughts on that. Like,
Well, I think
I
right
don't know.
there you're at the beginning of a very good roar in the sense that we're kind of recognizing the message. By the way, do you have your "Don't Follow Your Heart" shirt on?
I do. I love
Nice,
it.
nice. So you're actually on a good kind of a good road for the roar there because in the roar we would talk about like, okay, we're going to recognize the message. We're recognizing that we're having the switcheroo that it's taking place.
Hmm.
That good is evil and evil is good, but we're saying what is the partial truth that we can affirm? Okay, so the partial truth
Hmm.
that we can affirm is that humans are not 100% good or 100% bad. And so people
Right.
do have backstories. The concept that our environment does affect the way we behave. There are some things that will bring out, when someone's gone through horrific circumstances, that can sometimes bring out
Hmm.
something in them that maybe someone who comes from a very sheltered home life may not struggle with as much. So this is a
Right.
great opportunity to roar through this, but say, okay, so let's take about the differences between do we make this good and evil distinction for people? Now let's say, do we make this good and evil distinction for ideas? Okay, are there ideas that are 100% evil? Yes, there are. Are there entities? Are there spiritual entities that are 100% good and 100% evil? Yes, there are. So let's distinguish between spirits and ideas versus humans. Okay, now we're kind of on that road of saying we're going to take what the movie has given us, which is that switcheroo, and now we're going to roar through it and then we're going to argue for a healthier approach. How can we affirm the truth without promoting the lie? What's a more nuanced way that we can say that. So actually, we are going to be doing a our next Mama Bear movie minute is going to be on Wicked for Good because even the name
Oh,
Wicked for
awesome.
Good,
I know. How horrible.
right? It's like that itself is creating the category that someone could be wicked for good. And so again,
We're
once
good.
kids hear this, then it's like, oh, well, that can be true. No, no, you're never going to be wicked for good. That's never going to
Nope,
happen. But they have this category that's been created. Anybody else
totally.
thinking about these things or notice this? Alexa, yes.
Well, there's the movie The Descendants. And the first three movies, I think they were keeping a clear category of the good and evil because they were trying to give the descendants of the villains the
Hmm.
opportunity to choose to be good. So they're
Uh,
not defined by their parents. So, but then in the fourth movie, which they years later they started a new like trilogy. So in
yeah.
the fourth movie, there's this one song called Get Your Hands Dirty.
Mm.
And I just got to read some of the lyrics.
Yes, please.
Right and wrong, cruel and kind, who's to say? And then the other girl saying, well, there's a code I believe in. Every choice you're going to find, there's shades of gray. There are
Mm.
rules for a reason. And then it goes on. She says, okay, but there are some universal truths you must recognize, like valiant knights, pure and good, guaranteed. The other girl goes, that depends on what they're fighting for. Creepy witches selling potions for evil deeds. She could have kids she's providing for. So that whole song drives me nuts. Anyways, that was a great example.
That is a really good example. And like we can even take this with our kids for especially the ones that are older. For, hopefully your younger ones are not aware of all the ice stuff that's happening right now. And I don't mean the weather. I mean the stuff that is just absolutely inundating social media, which is like the reason why we created the den to like give you like a safe place away from all that or a place to have actual conversations instead of just people barking at each other. But what we have going on right now is the actual playing out of this worldview that the people who are in authority are actually the evil ones, and the people who they are trying to arrest are actually the good guys. Like I've seen something where there was an ICE person that went and was like, you know, all these people were blowing whistles, and he's coming to them and he's saying, do you realize you're protecting a child rapist right now? Do you realize we are trying to arrest a child rapist? That is who you're protecting right now. And like the person just keeps blowing their whistle because that concept has been reified and reified and reified so many times. The ones in charge are evil. You just don't know what the evil is that they're doing. They're just a lot better at hiding it. And therefore, we need to stand up for these people who they are saying are the evil ones that are probably actually the good guys. Now, we're not going to make a judgment about every situation because, you know, if we've learned nothing, it's that there's a whole lot of mess going on with all the ice stuff. So it's like we can't say something about every single situation. But we probably can say to be 100% on one side or 100% on the other, you know, there's going to be fault on both sides. I mean, in general, I think that we need to like a lot of this wouldn't be happening if people would stop. Anyway, I'm not even going to go into it. I think there's something to be said for having being able to follow law and order. There's something to be said for that. But because this this story has been said so many times in the movies. We are watching this play out in the real world. Now, there's not a single person who's out there blowing their whistle that's going to say, it's because I saw the movie Wicked and I realized that the bad guys could really be good. And that's one of the things that a lot of times you'll hear people say when you say, hey, I'm trying to protect my kids from this. And they're like, they're not going to go and decide to, you know, do something because they saw it in a movie. No, but it will be like that white carnation that incorporates those little pieces of dye into 1,000 different beliefs, or in this, you know, 1,000 different cells, in our case, 1,000 different beliefs with that little tiny piece of truth. And that it's really, really hard to uproot that once it's in 1,000 different places because they've absorbed this. Any other thoughts?
I think culturally, so the other thing is socialism that's kind of going on as far as like you see videos of college kids kind of like protesting for socialism, and then I like the videos where they actually talk to someone who comes from a country that
Yes.
was ruled by socialism, and then they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that, that's actually what it means," and oh, I got to do more research on that. I guess I just didn't know so much about it. Because again, that's what's going around,
Hmm.
what they're
I
seeing
think
around constantly, constantly. Yeah.
back in the day, back when like Bush was the big person that everybody hated, it's like they went and they showed people pictures of these different world dictators, and they had like Bush, and they had like Pol Pot, and they had Stalin, and they're like rank these from, bad to worst. And without fail, all the college students were like, George Bush is the worst. And they're like picking up like Stalin. They're like, do you realize this guy murdered 50 million of his own people? And like, they were like, for whatever, because they'd heard Bush is so evil, Bush is so evil, and now it's Trump is so evil, Trump is so evil, whoever is so evil. We hear it all the time, depending on what our algorithm is. Because someone's heard it that many times, they cannot tell the difference between murdering 50 million of your own people and whatever else is going on. Because no matter what else is going on with Bush or Trump or Biden for that matter, none of them have murdered 50 million people. So, like, to even compare those is like you can't even compare those. But again, because you hear it, familiar, familiar, familiar equals true. Um, let's see. So yeah, so we've got the Wicked for Good, we've got the Has Been Hotel, we've got the Cruella, which is going to turn into, like we saw the words from the original Cruella de Vil. She is going to turn into the one that's just traumatized. We've got Maleficent, and Maleficent actually, it was interesting. It was my first time to watch it today. Not only is she the one who it very much is kind of like the Satan character, but when they actually have true love's kiss, she actually she learns to love Aurora, and so her kiss when she kisses her on the forehead, saying, like basically, I regret putting this curse on you. When she kisses her forehead, that's the true love's kiss that wakes Aurora up. So it's almost this idea that the evil can repent. And now, when we're talking about people, we absolutely want evil to be able to repent. However, I'm going to take y'all back to one of the movies that Alexa and I did a couple months ago, which was K-pop Demon Hunters, where they introduced this concept that these evil demon things were actually under the oppression of Guima. And so there's this one spot in there that I wish I could just get a clip of, this one spot where one of the demon hunter girls is like fighting this demon, and she stops fighting him for a second, goes, "Wait, are you being oppressed by Guima?" And it gets this big, like, sardonic smile on its face because it realizes in that moment where she has just had this kind of we'll call it toxic empathy for a demons who we should never have any kind of empathy for, that he can now attack her because she just let her guard down. And I mean, if you blink you'll miss it in the movie, but it's there and it's so beautiful. Yes, so someone just commented on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So remember what we said at the very beginning, that kind of like apologetics. So let's talk about this in a positive direction, the idea of case building. In apologetics, you have things that are trying to build a case from scratch. So classical apologetics starts with, so Alexa, do you want to give us like a really brief overview of classical apologetics where they take you from A to B to C to D? Like, what's the progression there?
So classical apologetics is where you kind of start with just what everybody agrees on,
Mm-hmm.
and you build the case for the existence of God and supernatural first. And
Mm-hmm.
then once you make that case, then you can move on to more classic arguments of the
Yeah.
case for the resurrection and more specific arguments.
Yeah, so it's like the idea of God. Okay, now which God? Okay, it's the theistic God, meaning that he interacts with. He's not the deistic God that doesn't interact with the world. It's the theistic God. Okay, now that we're at the theistic God, can we say if it's the Christian God, because we have all these other gods from other religions that interact with the world? How do we know it's the Christian God? Okay, now how do we know that Jesus is the one? So it's like taking each step and each step is building on the previous step. So, what I can't remember who it was that brought this up. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, if I were to have guessed anything that I thought was not gonna that was gonna be the biggest nothing burger of all time, back in the 90s, it was a movie called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And yes, it started out with a movie. It wasn't even a TV show at the time. And it just sounded like the stupidest thing you'd ever heard of, and yet it was like actually kind of funny. It's actually how Hilary Swank got her big start, which is kind of fun because everybody knows her for these like super serious roles, but she actually played this super ditzy high school girl in that. But it was basically introducing the concept of these supernatural beings, of trying to get people curious about things like vampires. And here we are 20, 25 years later, 30 years later, and we have stuff like Twilight, and we have all the other, the Vampire Diaries. We have all these different things. So we're starting to introduce these characters. Yeah, Harry Potter too. We're starting to introduce these characters that are we've thought of as being bad, and then we start changing their character to where maybe they're not that good, because we have Angel, of course, the one that Buffy falls in love with. It's like the good vampire. Um, and so it's like once we establish a category within the culture, then they move to the next step, which is what we're seeing happen, just slowly but surely through all these things, to where I really think we're being primed for a lot of demonic activity, because people are seeing this so much that it's not going to be surprising anymore. It's not going to be something like, oh, this is something you hear about in third world countries over in Africa. This is going to be like, oh no, this is something I've seen basically on every movie that's out there. And once this finally appears in the actual world, it's like, oh, I've kind of been expecting this for the past 15 years, because it's priming people again through that process of familiarity. Starts to breed the process of it is true. And not only the familiarity and the true, but it seems true. And now it's plausible. It's a plausible explanation. And again, it's very much the long game that the enemy is playing, but it's there. And so this is one of the things that I would love for, as you're watching things with your kids, to be paying attention to, is asking them, always asking them, who is the hero, who is the villain. Also, and this is something that I think we should specifically ask for if you're watching Wicked for Good with your kids, and this is something that Alexa and Anya and I are going to talk about on our podcast, is to ask them, if you were to pick a character or a group of characters in this movie that you think they are trying to make a parallel with the church, who do you think it would be? If your kids have any sort of insight, they're going to be like, oh, the Oz character, the wizard, that's kind of like the pastor, and the guy that doesn't actually know anything, but he pretends to, kind of like Sean Bowles. And which we've got that going on in our culture right now as well. And then all the people who are basically the mindless lemmings who are following this guy who's actually the evil guy, and basically they're perpetuating the evil by just going along with it. These are the categories we're creating. Who's the bad guy? The church is the bad guy. Now, in the future, in the real world, when people want to frame the church as the bad guy, it seems true, it sounds familiar, and it's a plausible story because we've heard it so many times. So, did I just depress everybody?
It reminds me of my husband. He ruined my favorite Disney movie for me, Beauty and the Beast.
Uh-huh.
Well, come on. Like, it was just this beautiful, the princess falls in love, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Turns out, like, Gaston's actually the good guy. Anyway, and once he explained it to me, I can't, unthink it now. Like, this beast was really a horrible person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he treated everyone bad. Like, he was willing to let an old woman die in the cold because he didn't want to help her. Yeah. And, somehow we're supposed to feel bad for him because he's cursed. Because deep down, he's got a good heart. But well,
I don't think we feel bad for him because he's cursed. We're supposed to be there for the journey as he goes from, as he's transformed by love. Anyway, sorry.
Yes, there you go. I can come back with that. But
Yeah.
yeah, and so it was just interesting to see how, like, as a kid, I just didn't even question that. Like, Gaston was mean, the Beast was nice. Like, he
Hmm.
really had love in his heart. Gaston did not. But like, it's just funny when you kind of zoom out and look at like the headlines of that story. It actually plays out a bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this. I love the words for the Gaston song, especially the one about I'm especially good at expectorating. It's like I knew all these words. I sang them when I was a kid, and I didn't realize that meant hockanaloogie. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly. But it's
yeah,
true.
good
Like, even
times.
old school Disney, Cinderella. I had this
Yeah.
conversation with my daughter about it. It's like who is the good character? Who's the hero in that story? It's a
Hmm.
fairy godmother. It's
Yeah.
like somebody who's using magic. And so it's just interesting to see her little head go. It's like, but the fairy godmother's her mother, like godmother, like she's good. It's, yeah,
Yeah.
I know, but so just even how very, like, your point about just being saturated in something for so long, it can just
Yeah.
like change our perspective so much
Yes.
gradually.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on that? Yes,
I was
Alexa.
gonna, I'll be sharing this when we do our Wicked recording.
Yeah.
But I found it really interesting when I was researching that the Good Witch in the original Wizard of Oz, in the original book, which
Glinda?
was written, Glinda, yeah, in 1900 is when the book was written. Her character was inspired by L. Frank Baum. He was the author. His
Hmm.
mother-in-law, who was a radical feminist, who was known for defending the women who were like witch hunted throughout history, and
Interesting.
he wanted to purposely, like, I guess, kind of honor her and the idea of like introduce the category of a good witch. That was like
Mm.
an actual purposeful idea put into that story.
So who was it? Was it you and Anya that I was talking to when we were talking about the Wicked for Good? And there was somebody that was saying their kid goes, "It never occurred to me to think about that movies are trying to teach me something." It was like it was this big light bulb aha moment of like, oh, movies are trying to teach me something, and I should look to see what they're trying to teach me. It's amazing the kinds of things that when you open up a category that didn't exist in a child's mind before, I mean, there is so much learning that happens from that that you don't even have to oversee. Like, I even remember the moment when I understood what symbolism was. It's like one of those light bulb moments, flash bulb memories. I was sitting, it was the movie, oh golly, is this movie about a woman whose husband was a pilot and he dies, and then it's showing her trying to move on, but it's like her pilot husband's like ghost is still kind of around. And there's a scene where she's starting to see this other man, and she kind of closes the door right in the ghost's face. And there was a guy sitting next to me, one of my friends, Zach, that goes, symbolism. That's all it took for me to realize, oh, them closing the door in the face, that's symbolic of the fact that she's moving on from her husband. That tiny little moment right there opened up the category of what does symbolism mean. Now, since I had that category, it made it to where I opened up all these other categories and all these other movies that I was watching to where I could be like, oh, what's symbolism in there? How do we get our kids to the point of where they realize they have that aha moment of movie and music is trying to teach me something? So, thoughts on that, conversations you've had with your kids, ways you think that you could get them to have this aha moment? Let's hear it.
I think repetition it just has been a big one for us. It's, my kids now, anytime follow your heart or something about the heart, they're like, hey, they're telling you that's wrong. The heart is deceitful. And so it's a funny thing now because it's like anything they hear in music or in a movie, it's like the heart part. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we got it. That's good. So it's just
Love
that
it.
repetition. Just you keep going at it, you keep talking about it. You try to just
Hmm.
have these casual conversations with them. And the more we do it, the more it just sticks. And it just pops out at them when you least expect it. Even sometimes I'm not even
Yes.
aware, and they're like, "Mom, did you get that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, there it is."
You're like, there it is. Yeah. Like my husband, I always like to joke about that whenever we're going somewhere. I'm like, okay, which way are we going? He's like, just follow your heart. And, like we just do little jokes on that. Um, but yeah, that is one of the things. And it's like, it's the best thing is when your kids are the ones making you roll your eyes instead of you saying it all the time and making them roll your eyes. Although I still maintain for every parent out there that a kid rolling their eyes means that job well done, that they have heard this so many times. They just want to gag if you say it again, which means you are in their brain like an earworm. Good job, Mama Bear. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Kind of along the same vein, but like asking the same type of question all the time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so is that true? So that the good girl said that. Is that true? And then my 7-year-old actually the other night, before I could even say it, because we were watching a new show together, and he goes, "I know. Is that true, Mommy?" Before I could even ask, I was like, inside, I was like, yes.
Nice.
Like, what are the good questions to ask? And obviously, my kids are little, so the questions are quite simple right now. But it's kind of laying that groundwork.
Should I go get the pillow?
Get the pillow. I want
Okay,
the
keep
pillow.
talking. Keep talking. I'm going to get the pillow.
We have new stuff on our Mama Bear store. There's a pillow. Do you all have little kids or teenagers? It's hard to ask always. Gabby?
I have three little ones,
Okay.
6, 5, and 4.
Oh, wow.
So we're just starting to like kind of as far as like questioning and
Yeah, yeah.
So
There it
we've
is.
got our roar pillow, but this isn't the best part. Here's the best part. That part is the best part.
It's all
This
the
goes
questions.
this goes
I
through
love
all the
that.
questions. So
Well,
this is from my roar talk that I give when I go traveling. So recognizing the message. So if it's media, what is the main theme? What values are being uplifted? What are they laughing at? What are they portraying as good and bad? Which characters are attractive? Who are you supposed to root for? This gives you the questions to ask and then takes you through the offer objective discernment, argue for a healthier approach, and then reinforce. So you can have your roar pillow out there. I like the colors. And then you throw someone the pillow and be like, hey, let's ask some of the questions. And you've got them right there. So, anyway, we've
or
been
you could be
joking.
super sly. You could be like cuddling with it on movie night. Be like, so what do you think?
Yep, just kind of
Yeah,
taking a peek at your cheat sheet. We joke all
exactly.
the times about making stuff into throw pillows, and we're like, we're gonna do it. We're gonna make a throw pillow. So, any other movies that, this is even just for research purposes for me as I'm researching some more of this. Any other things? Let me see if I can pull up the Has Been Hotel. What's it called? The If I can find the right trailer for it, because I think it's worth watching just the trailer. But yeah, just talk about if there's any other movies that you've noticed or songs that you've noticed is happening in. And Alexa, dude, that song, we need to roar through that song on one of the things. That's fire. I mean, that is like that's crazy how literal they are.
Yes, and there will be more sequels of that movie, so I am very curious where they will go with it. But
Yeah.
mhm.
I've noticed a few things with my kids watching. The parents are usually portrayed as the bad guys in a lot of stories. For example, we just watched Zootopia, and I don't know if you've seen it, but in that one, the parents are actually the ones holding her back from her dreams.
Interesting.
And it's like, but no, like you're a little bunny rabbit. Like your parents just don't want you to get hurt because you're not supposed to be a cop. Like it's and
Yeah.
so like my husband was he actually like he likes to ruin movies for people. He ruined the movie for my kids because the whole time he was like, she's wrong, she's being stupid. But because it's like the parents somehow just can't possibly be grounded in reality because if it gets in the way of what you want to do, anything that gets in the way of what you want to do, that must be the problem. I've seen that a few times in a few different movies.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I used to watch the show Supernatural, on
Mm.
Netflix. And as this, I don't remember when this storyline started, but at some point through the seasons, they brought in this angel character, and the angel was being attacked by the rest of the angels, like they were after him. And it turned out like God was, this oppressive evil, and the other angels were his, like his army basically. And then you had the Satan character, which I can't remember. I think he actually was evil as well. But then it was like the people in the middle were the good, righteous ones.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would say that's the stepwise that they keep going. Okay, it's the people in the middle because I would say that now it's the people who are at the top that are always the evil ones. I did find this thing on Has Been Hotel. So let me see if I can. I just texted it to myself on here. Let me see if I can pull it up.
One other movie I watched recently, and I actually posted about this in the Den on the Roar section, is In Your Dreams, that was put out by Netflix. Um,
Oh, huh.
um, it actually has a pretty good family structure, which surprised me. Both parents working together to solve a problem. The little girl's kind of struggling with the fact that her parents had a disagreement. But part of the premise is them trying to get to the Sandman to make a wish. And we normally think of the Sandman as like the guy who gives good dreams or whatever. Um, but he actually like tries to trap them in a dream that is not reality because he wants them to be happy. And the
Oh,
person who's actually in charge of nightmares is actually trying to prevent them from getting to the Sandman because she realizes that she says something like nightmares actually help prepare you for the unknown or something like that. But
that's
it's a
probably true.
very good flip of the nightmare character that you normally think of like as a, bad, like demon type
Hmm.
thing is actually flipped. Um, and the Sandman is actually the bad character.
Although that makes me think of in Pixar's Inside Out, how they discover that sadness is actually one of the most important uh, emotions at the end. That it's not something they should reject, and so I would kind of say that that's true. Sometimes nightmares do prepare us for things, or it helps us work through stuff. Okay, so I'm going to
Yeah.
attempt to see if I can share this and have y'all be able to hear it.
Once upon a time, there was a glowing city protected by golden gates, known as heaven. It was ruled by beings of pure light, angels that worshipped good and shielded all from evil. Lucifer was one of these angels. He was a dreamer with fantastical ideas for all of creation, but he was seen as a troublemaker by the elders of heaven, for they felt his way of thinking was dangerous to the order of their world. So he watched as the angels began to expand the universe in their ways. From the dust of earth, they created Adam and Lilith, equals as the first of mankind. But despite this, Adam demanded control, and Lilith refused to submit to his will. She fled the garden. Drawn in by her fierce independence, Lucifer found her, and the two rebellious dreamers fell deeply in love. Together, they wished to share the magic of free will with humanity, offering the fruit of knowledge to Adam's new bride, Eve, who gladly accepted. But this gift came with a curse, for with this single act of disobedience, evil finally found its way into Earth. With it, a new realm of darkness and sin, and the order heaven had worked to maintain was shattered. As punishment for their reckless act, heaven cast Lucifer and his love into the dark pit he had created, never allowing him to see the good that came from humanity, only the cruel and the wicked. Ashamed, Lucifer lost his will to dream, but Lilith thrived, empowering demonkind with her voice and her songs, and as the numbers of hell grew, so did its power. Threatened by this, heaven made a truly heartless decision, that every year they would send down an army, an extermination, to ensure hell and its sinners could never rise against them. But Lilith's hope remained, and her dream was passed down to their precious daughter, the Princess of Hell.
So, thoughts? Normally, we will not have things that are this overt, but this concept right here is Luciferianism, and this is what we're seeing being played out in things like Wicked for Good. Tell you what, Mama Bears, you cannot refute something unless you understand it. The more we understand it, the more we can refute it, and the more our kids will be able to refute it. And basically, once they recognize that this pollution's trying to get into their worldview stream, they're like, oh, no thanks. And it does not get sucked up with all that dye. It no longer becomes the rivers that they're swimming in. They are in the pure gospel, and they can recognize when that pollution is coming in. So go forth, be mama bears, ask all the questions, make your kids' eyes roll into the back of their heads, because you repeat yourself over and over again, as we say in the sexuality book, things to repeat to your kids until they want to gag. So go make them gag by repeating all the good things. Love y'all.